everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How are you all doing? Oh boy, I was just looking up. I remembered making a fake letter when Trump first got elected in 2016. I made a fake letter from the Department of Homeland Security that they were sending out to people, and I had a yellow Star of David in it. Well, they called it a sheriff's star in this fake letter. And it said, it's not mandatory to wear this sheriff's star just yet, but keep it because it may soon be mandatory. And even then, it was pretty obviously, at least what I thought was pretty obviously satire. I have definitely, as you can maybe see from my posting history, missed the mark on what I think is obvious satire and what other people think is real. Some people thought that was real. But it is interesting to live in a time where we're closer to that being a reality. When if I post that now, it's slightly more believable. So anyway, how are you all doing? This is a fun episode today. This is Gina Birch. If you don't know who Gina is, why, folks, I'm going to read you her bio right now. Originally from Nottingham in the UK, musician Gina Birch formed the seminal art punk band The Raincoats with Anna Da Silva in 1977. They released 3 incredible records on Rough Trade. They're self-titled, Odd Shape and Moving, and then broke up in 1984. But this was merely the start of Gina's artistic career. She worked with Red Crayola, formed the band Dorothy, became a filmmaker and music video director, reunited with Anna to support Nirvana on tour, and subsequently make another album as The Raincoats, and of course, record music under her own name. Her first solo album, I Play My Bass Loud, came out in 2021, and her latest, Trouble, was just released on Third Man Records, and it's great. I'll say this. This was tough, but ultimately I really enjoyed talking to Gina. When we were setting up the interview, her publicist was like, hey, she's on tour, but she has time in the afternoon at the venue before the performance one night. And my podcaster sense started tingling because historically, those are not ideal circumstances to have the kind of conversations I have on the show. I remember before I was just doing this over Zoom, years and years ago, when I first, in the first couple years of the show, Matt Sharp from The Rentals was performing in New York. And because it was so early in the show, no one knew who I was. Podcasts weren't that big. I guess it was even the first couple years, maybe even before WTF took off. But his manager, publicist was like, yeah, you can meet him at the venue. And I remember we sat, I think there's probably some interesting stuff in there, but we sat in an alcove at Irving Plaza on the first floor, somewhere near the merch, maybe. I can't even remember exactly. And just had a in-depth conversation about his childhood while people are streaming in to come see the show. And I think, and no shade, even though I am for sure shading the kind of interviews I'm about to make fun of. But, if you're doing an interview, you're like, what's this lyric mean? Or whatever, how'd you record this album? If you do that, that's fine. I don't really have a problem with it. It's not my thing. But I'm sure you can do that in that context, and everything's hunky-dory. But thanks to therapy, I've been trying to be somewhat less of a control freak, and I really want to talk to Gina. Ever since I first heard, I guess it was Odd Shape is the first one I heard in college. I've been a huge fan of the Raincoats. And I'm like, you know what? As long as Gina can find a quiet place to record, it should be okay. And ultimately it was. I think she was somewhat surprised by the existentialist line of questioning, but she was game, which is cool. So I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Gina. Coming up on the show, got some good talks coming up. Thalia Zedek. Very cool. Mark Hollander of Aksak Mabul, founder of Cram Discs. Interesting guy. Tomorrow, I'm assuming this is going to happen. I'm talking to David Roth, writer, defector, probably one of the few people who can write about Trump in a way that makes me laugh. Whereas everything else I read about politics these days fills me with rage and sadness. So that should be a fun talk. So stay tuned for those. But for now, let's talk to Gina. So I was trying to read up on your childhood. Nottingham. So that's what, Midlands?
Yep. I was the first British baby to survive 3 blood transfusions because my mum was rhesus negative and my dad was rhesus positive. And in 1955, if you had the 2 blood groups in a baby, the blood fought, and often the baby didn't survive. And so they'd often do a blood transfusion and hope that that would take, and then a second one. With me, they did 3, and it worked the 3rd time. So I was the first British baby to survive 3 blood transfusions after having fighting blood groups from my parents.
Wait, hold on.
You're looking very mystified by that. You need to get some medical science in there. It's old news because now you get an injection. Have you ever had kids? Do you know about that?
No.
When there are different blood groups, negative and positive, if a couple has the negative and the positive, one has the mother has the injection to stop that fighting going on, but they hadn't worked that out in the 1950s.
Sorry, wait, this is just a common thing that happens, that if there's 2 different blood types like that, it's just a dangerous mix for a child?
It was in the 1950s. It's like many things used to be dangerous in the 1950s that have been sorted now. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Gina, I live in America, so we're going back towards that.
It's not a problem anymore. The woman has an injection which stops the bloods fighting. But when I was born, it was a problem.
But the fact, I guess what I'm mystified is the fact that that's every time that I hear about childbirth and I hear about every problem that can come up during childbirth or during gestation, it's a miracle in my mind that any child is born.
Exactly.
When did you find out? Because this seems to me like you were already born, like with an article written about you. Like, yeah. I assume some paper.
Well, apparently, my mum can't remember it now because she's 97, but she said it was there was an article on the front of the medical journal when that happened. Yes.
So when do you find out about that? Because I think that is interesting, that you come into the world already with some kind of unique thing about you.
Well, maybe. The thing is, I was in hospital for a long time because I had to put weight on for 3 days in a row. And I didn't do that for a while. And then I'd put weight on for 2 days and then not the third. And then, so I was in there for, I don't know, a month or 2 and then went home. And I was okay after that.
But when do you find out that this is your that you were born into a medical miracle?
Oh, quite late, I suppose. Maybe about 12 or something, I got told. It didn't seem to be that important to anyone, really. Well, maybe before. Actually, my mum did have a 3rd baby that didn't survive because apparently the first baby is often okay with this ancient problem. I was the 2nd baby and I had the problem. And then the 3rd baby, it gets worse. And the 3rd baby didn't survive.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you don't find out about this till later anyway. So it didn't change anything for you. Was it just like, oh, that's interesting?
Yeah. Well, once it was interesting. And I was like, have you got the article? No. And now my mum can barely remember that was even a thing,
Yeah.
She is 97.
Wow. So post-war by 10 years, Midlands. I mean, did the war even touch the Midlands? I don't really know. I feel like the Blitz, and then I don't know anything else about, I guess, the coast got bombed. I don't know really much else about
Yeah,
England.
well, I mean, the thing is that my parents were, my dad had been in the war. My mum had been a teenager during the war, and so they were very affected by the Second World War. And rationing didn't end till after I was born. Rationing in the UK went on and on and on. My parents went on honeymoon to France, and there was no rationing there. They couldn't. Everything was perfectly back to normal in France, but not in the UK. And so, my childhood I was brought up kind of never waste anything, always turn the lights off. There was a real kind of frugality, if you like, that everything was, we had to be really careful about everything, never waste anything, and be very grateful and thankful for everything, which is a good thing.
Yeah, sure. I turn the lights out if I'm not in the room. Like, yeah, it's just a good thing in general. You don't have to grow up during the Depression or post-war in England to appreciate that.
Well, I know, but when you see all those, if you're going through the city and you go past an office building, I mean, all the office buildings seem to have their lights on 24 hours, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
No one there is turning the lights off as they leave, are they?
No. So, did that affect you, or did that affect anything, like the way that you exist in the world?
No, I think I had a childhood which was kind of very safe. Everything. My parents wanted everything to be safe, so that meant that it wasn't a great adventurous life. Do you know what I mean? It was everything was about making sure everything was safe. So it affected me in that perhaps I was quite shy, and I didn't really know about adventure until I discovered misadventure, if you know what I mean. I wanted to do everything right, and I think it was when I hit like about 11 or 12, I suppose, puberty, when I discovered my, I discovered a more, what's the word, rebellious nature, that I suddenly felt, hang on a minute, this is quite kind of oppressive or something. And, so I started to test the rules. I think that's fairly common, isn't it? That as you hit puberty, you kind of thinking, I think up until that point, you think your parents are right about everything. Well, I did. I thought my parents were right about everything because everything they tell you seems to make sense. And they've created this world for you, which is the world that you inhabit. And I wasn't really questioning it as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I knew what I was going to ask you was like, during this, before puberty, when you were saying like everything seemed right, I'm trying to think back to that time, and I'm like, it feels like forever that I've always felt there was something I couldn't articulate, but that didn't feel right about. I love my parents, just so we're clear. Love my parents, grew up great, all that stuff. But it never felt right. I didn't feel settled. I didn't feel like I belonged in a way that I couldn't formulate.
Well, I suppose, I mean, I went to a convent school, so I was taught by nuns. We used to go into the convent at lunchtime and buy cards of saints and like pretty saints cards, and we used to go to confession and then to communion, and on certain days we'd wear these white dresses, like wedding dresses that were for the girls, and they're just short little First Holy Communion dresses. The thing that used to upset me, I suppose, was when we went on holiday, we used to be the four of us at a table in a hotel, and there used to be other families that used to be kind of together and talking to each other and having lots of fun. And I felt we were quite isolated as a family. I wanted to be part of something bigger. I wanted to belong to all these other people, had friends, and go on holiday with lots of friends, and we did that once or twice, and I really liked it then. But when we were just on our own, it used to make me a bit, a bit like, oh, I wish things were different,
Yeah. Do you think is it just your parents' personalities? Was it like the war, like PTSD, where your dad kind of like went inside? Like, what do you think was going on?
I don't know. I think my mum came from a kind of Irish Cockney family who were very they used to drink a lot. Not my mum, but the family did. And they always had lots of family and friends around. My dad was more from a Protestant family where they didn't do all that singing at Christmas and da-di-da and loads of friends and family. So I think my mum would have preferred it to be more jolly, but my dad was the boss, really. I mean, in those days, the man was the head of the house, and he set the tone, really. I don't think he had PTSD, but he didn't need that. He didn't want that thing where there's lots of other people. He liked doing it how he'd like it to be. Whereas if you're going with other people, you've got to be give and take about the friends and so on and so forth. And my dad was one of these people who was a performer when he was with other people. But when he wasn't with other people, he could relax and be himself, And it was probably quite tiring for him to be with lots of other people.
I see. No, yeah. I know that kind of person. It takes a lot of energy. My wife's mother was visiting over the weekend, and it was exhausting to have to, we like her, just so we're clear, but you have to pretend a little bit. You have to kind of like, she doesn't really understand. My wife's an actor and a stand-up, and I'm a writer here in Los Angeles, and like, our parents don't. Well, I mean, this is interesting. Do your parents understand, like, when you were starting out performing, did they get what you were doing?
Not really, because I wasn't doing something that they understood, because I was an art student who started playing in a band when I couldn't play or sing. So it was kind of coming from an art perspective. But, I think they thought if I was going to do music, I should be able to sing and play. So why would I be singing and playing when I couldn't sing or play? And when they've heard the first Raincoats record, record, Dad thought it was a racket, So he didn't really understand, because I didn't really explain, I don't think. I don't think I really told them what I was doing for a long time.
Yeah.
And I mean, even recently, my mum's neighbour had come to see me play in Cambridge, UK. And she was telling my mum she'd been, and my mum said, was there anybody there? Because my mum can't quite understand that people would want to come and see me anyway, really.
So, okay. So four decades into a career, and your mom is still, that resonates with me. that yeah. you're in this and they still don't understand.
Yeah, well, the world's changing all the time, isn't it? And I have kids now, and I'm sure they'll do things that I just don't understand. And I think it's hard to say, really. I mean, my mum grew up as a woman where appearances were very important to her. She's like, oh, that person's good looking, or that person's attractive, and she sees things from a very, I mean, it's a very sweet perspective, but she doesn't, I mean, like, she's not keen on Picasso or Francis Bacon painter, which, she can't understand why I like them, And so I just say I try to explain to her why I like them, and she and in the end we have to say, well, we'll agree to differ. She likes things that are more obviously pretty or attractive and not challenging in that kind of breaking the rules, breaking boundaries, and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is interesting, there is that feeling like when you are talking to someone, like whether it's a parent or whether it's someone else, and you have to pretend, it takes so much energy. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I kind of understand what your dad must have been feeling, how much energy you have to put out when you can't just be, I mean, I've tried to curate, my wife and I have both tried to curate our lives where we're mostly around people who get us. And so we don't have to pretend and don't have to put on a show.
Yeah, I think, we didn't have a lot of parties at our house or anything. And so, my dad and when we were at the dinner table, my dad used to hold court quite a lot, so he would be the one who would kind of engineer conversations, but he would do most of the talking.
Okay.
My brother, this is a terrible thing to say, but my brother did say to me, his father-in-law said something to him that our dad never said to him, which was, "What do you think, Nick?" My dad was very lovely and very loving, but he didn't really ask us what we thought about things.
Was that just the time? Was that just like, hey, the father does that at this time, in the 1950s into the 60s? Or was it more like a kind of narcissism? Like, what do you think was happening?
I don't know. I'll leave. I think it perhaps a little. I think it was very much the time, but also, he was funny and he liked having an audience. So you can take what you want from that. I don't want to say my dad was a narcissist. I mean, I said to my husband, "Do you think I'm a narcissist?" And he said, "Well, you know what? Every performer has a touch of narcissism." And so, I mean, in order to do what we do, we have to kind of have a bit of self-belief that maybe what we've got to say has got some resonance. And I suppose people who are completely non-narcissistic might just keep their mouth shut and never want to tread upon the stage.
I do think, though, performance requires some amount of empathy. Unless what you're doing is so closed off and it just happens to...
Oh.
I don't know. Actually, I'm struggling to think of how you need some kind of empathy.
Okay. Are you saying that empathy is the opposite of narcissism?
I was. And then as I'm saying it, I'm in my head, I'm like, no, it's not. And I think you're pointing out too, that it's not the opposite. You could be a narcissist and still have some kind of empathy, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I all performers maybe have to have a touch of narcissism, but I think good performers have quite a good amount of empathy too. So, yeah. What is the recipe for a good performer?
This is interesting. Or this is the thing. I'm trying to think of I know some people in showbiz who are psychopaths or sociopaths, and I'm like, but they're good performers. And I'm thinking, have they just figured out, they're just smart and have figured out what works with an audience, and so they're able to manipulate an audience in the same way they're able to manipulate a single person.
Yeah, I think so.
And so therefore they don't need empathy.
No, because they've got the performative aspect of empathy. Are they following a script of or are they improvising or yeah. And when they come off stage, do they go back to the me?
Yeah.
Who knows?
You can see the people I'm thinking of in my head. You can see when they come off stage, it drops. You can know, there's a physical difference, almost Peter Sellers shedding a character or something like that.
Yeah, Peter Sellers. Do you see him in the? Did you watch the Beatles 8 hours?
No.
Performance. You've heard of it?
Yes.
There was all this footage of the Let It Be footage. Yeah, because Peter Sellers goes into the studio where the Beatles are, and they're all kind of jive chatting and stuff. And Peter Sellers is really quite awkward. He's not being completely center of their adulation, and he's looking a little uncomfortable. So I think you have a case in point there.
I've heard stories that when he wasn't in character, there was just nothing there. He was a void, and he would have to to be in the world, he would have to have that character, whatever character he was playing on.
Yeah.
Otherwise it was just nothing there.
Yeah.
That's what I've heard.
Be interesting, wouldn't it, to live life with a script? Imagine as you get out of bed, you're handed a script of how to behave that day and what to say and what to do. And then every morning you're handed that script. That would be weird.
Well, this is the thing. I talk about this on the show a lot, where I think a lot of people find comfort in that. And like one of the questions I always have on the show is, to my guests, how do you break out of that? Because I think all of us were kind of given that. Unless your parents were so bohemian, I think all of us were given some kind of like, well, this is what you're supposed to do. And I always kind of curious, like, how do you break out of that? Like, were you given a kind of, not obviously not literally, but like, hey, you're supposed to do X, Y, or Z with your life?
I think drinking helped.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? You lose a lot of that. For me, I think drinking helped me break out of that. It certainly helped me break out of shyness. I realized that, like when we first started in the Raincoats, I had all these people I would have loved to have talked to, but I was far too shy and thought, well, they won't want to talk to me, or they don't even, I didn't even think they wouldn't want to talk to me. I just knew they wouldn't, just was just not an issue. But I knew when I'd had a few drinks, or even quite a lot of drinks, I could talk to anybody. And eventually, after a while, I thought, and I read in this book by Steve Biddulph, How to Raise Happy Children, that shyness is a disability. And so I thought, actually, I'm losing this disability through alcohol, but I don't really want to drink as much as I'm drinking. So eventually I thought, if I can be this person when I'm drunk, that is me too. And I can learn to be that person when I'm not drunk. And so that's how I broke out of it, by embracing my drunken personality in my sober life.
I mean, what was the process of that? Because the thing for me, why I never really liked alcohol. I mean, I don't like the taste of it, but also like I never got rid of the voice. Even when I was drunk, that kind of voice in my head, that anxious, neurotic voice never went away. And so it never seemed to me like the promise of alcohol was always like, it's going to be easier to talk to women. You're going to be more free. And it never was. And so I was just like, I came to the same conclusion as you, where I'm just like, well, I might as well learn how to be a normal human. A
different person. Yeah. Well, for me, it did work in that way. Yeah. I mean, I suppose men are more predatory than women.
On average.
If you know what I mean. And so, if I was a very shy man and I wasn't sure I could ask a woman out, maybe being drunk might not be as appealing. Some drunken man trying to chat me up might not be that convincing. Whereas a man chatting up a slightly inebriated woman, they know their chances are slightly more interesting. This is a really ridiculous conversation. But I think it must have been hard for you to kind of lose those inhibitions, because as you're drinking, your skills may have not been finely crafted. Yeah, I don't know.
No. But I guess the thing I'm trying to think about is, what is the pathway? So you're talking about you're already in the Raincoats by that point, right?
Yeah.
What led you to even like want to go to art school if you are coming from a kind of like a family where that doesn't seem like that's a possibility?
Well, the thing is, I had an older brother, and he, followed my dad's path. He went to Cambridge University and studied languages. And then I was 2 and a bit years younger than him. Pardon me. And my dad and my mum both quite liked doing bits of drawing. And I think they felt art school would be good for me, because I was good at art. I was always good at drawing and painting, and I was okay at other subjects, but I don't think my concentration was brilliant, and I was good at maths and art, and okay at everything else, but not brilliant. And we had one philosophy lesson, and I thought, oh, that's really amazing. So when I went to art school and discovered like conceptual art and stuff, and ideas around philosophical ways of looking at things, that kind of really fitted with me. And in a way, punk was like that. Punk was a kind of philosophy, and it wasn't just all about the rage and the fury. It was about the way of looking at the world and dealing with the world, and being creative within the world and challenging things. And so I think, my parents were quite happy, because they had the one who was doing the academic and the other who was doing the creative art,
So your brother kind of took the burden off. You were allowed maybe a little more space, because they're like, well, he's
absolutely. Yeah. I think generally speaking, I think there's a heavier burden on first children, and certainly on boys than girls. So I was lucky being second and a girl. I might fight for women's rights and all that, but in that instance, I was quite lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how do you start breaking out? You said like around puberty, you started to get rebellious. What led to that? What do you mean by rebellious? Like, what were you doing?
Oh, it was all about what there were like student mags, and just kind of getting interested in ideas around alternative culture, maybe sex and drugs. Sex and drugs, I think, were kind of beginning to enter on the periphery of my head, and I found out about them, but I didn't manage to explore them. My friend and I went on holiday with a friend, and we met these two boys who showed us how to roll a joint. Put the three papers together, and to lick the side of the cigarette and put the tobacco in, and then they said you burn the stuff and you sprinkle it in, and my friend bought a ring, because they said they were going to post some dope to her, and she knew that her mother would want to see this what was in the parcel, so she had this ring so that she could say, oh, that's what was sent to me. I don't think they ever sent it, and then we went to a party once, and someone handed us a joint. It was dark and there was music playing, and we had a couple of puffs on a joint, and that kind of thing. And it was all looking like, and I remember reading, there was an Observer newspaper and magazine, and on the front of the Observer Colour supplement was all about Haight-Ashbury. And there was pictures of these hippies, and it was saying, that they passed drugs from one mouth to another through kissing. So you'd see these two long-haired hippies kind of kissing as they were apparently passing the dope between them. And I just thought this was really exciting, and what's not to like about that? It just seems so like a world of adventure, to
Sure.
a girl from Nottingham where nothing seemed to happen. This looked like something quite wild.
Well, I mean, you're hitting puberty just as this stuff is coming into the culture, right? Like that's like 67, right? That's like when it's all like the Beatles are becoming psychedelic, right? All this stuff is starting to flow into the culture. And then as it crests, it's interesting to me because like it starts like you were at the exact age where like you get the whole of it starting and then curdling into the. I mean, I assume it curdles in the UK in the same way it kind of curdled here. Is that true?
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, yeah, I can't tell you everything. Yeah, this is going out on the radio or somewhere.
But that's what I do think is interesting. Like, how did you transform through those, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years? Like, was there, besides just the rebelliousness that kind of emerged, what else happened internally in you to change you from like the person who was very shy to the person who would go to art school and then become a musician?
I think I was always headed to art school. I didn't know what art school would be. I didn't know it would offer me the kind of freedom and brilliance that it did offer me. It was just, it's like you go from primary school to secondary school and you go through these different types of adventures. And then it was like, I got up to all sorts of mischief in the town, finding people who took drugs and had fun with them. And, and when I got to art school, I didn't really need that anymore because there was a different type of adventure. There was much more of a mental stimulation and all the people around me were more like me. They were kind of odd in a way. They didn't necessarily fit into academia or the factory or whatever. They were kind of, oddball people who were interested in a different way of looking at the world, maybe through fashion or painting or cinema, or they just had a little sparkle that I identified with. And no, I wasn't remotely interested in forming a band until I got to London. Well, I had seen the Sex Pistols' first gig by accident, but even then, I wasn't interested in forming a band until I saw the Slits play. I'd seen, Subway Sect, the Buzzcocks, the Clash, the Pistols, so many adverts, ATV, Scritti Politti, all these bands. But it was only when I saw the Slits play and I saw a whole group of women performing that it's like, it seems unbelievable that it had that effect, but it totally did. Seeing Palmolive on drums, Tessa on bass, in this instance it was Kate Corris, then it became it Viv Albertine, and Ari Up, only 14, 15, singing, and they were mischievous, they were funny, they were all the things that I really identified with, in a way that be able to have your own voice to shout about things that annoyed you or made you laugh, or you were with the Slits and you were the protagonist suddenly, instead of the person being done to. I was no laying over someone's brass bed anymore. It was, we were the protagonists. We could go shoplifting. We could talk about what was on the radio, or, it was like we could do what we wanted to do. And that was a whole different way of telling the stories, I mean, I know there'd been the Runaways, but it felt like they never kind of impacted on me in that way. But I never saw them live anyway, so. But when I saw the Slits, it just broke down all those barriers of thinking, it just made sense to me that I could be like that. And yeah.
Were you repressing this stuff earlier?
No, I didn't know. I didn't know it was there. I didn't really know it was there. And even when we did it, I was still quite shy on stage. Anna was quite kind of, she was 7 or 8 years older than me, and she was kind of more deeply centered. I was a bit kind of like a bit wobbly and all over the place, and just trying to learn how to play an instrument. and I gradually had to find it. I gradually found it. And a bit like, turning from the drunk into the sober extrovert. Right. I had to find it. I had to find it in myself, in the music, and to the way to tell stories and to explore and explain.
Yeah. Yeah, that really resonates with me, because I had a similar journey where, like, there was like something drawing me towards making things. And I couldn't articulate why. I couldn't articulate why I felt alive when I could make, I was in a band in college. I couldn't, and it felt right. But I was always like, but I can't do this.
I know. I mean, and it's also like, I could never call myself an artist. Finally, I realized that actually, after all these years, after 30, 40, 50 years of doing it, that's what I do. I look at things in a slightly different way from some people, and I explain and I explore and I go around the back and look at the side and over the top. And that's my life as an artist, to try and discover things and prod them and probe them and work out what my relationship to them is.
I mean, when you were younger, did you have any opportunities to kind of express yourself, or was it only once you went to art school, and once you actually started like performing and you started realizing this stuff, that's when you could express yourself finally?
Yeah. When I was in the Brownies, I was a fairy. I grew up from behind the piano and had to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but and it was a beautiful moment, but it never made me think I could do this. It was like, oh my God. I remember when I was singing it and the pianist kept saying, oh, you keep changing key. And I was like, I keep changing key. And I knew there was something wrong with what I was doing, and it never occurred to me that would be I don't remember applause or anything particularly inspiring me, or no, it definitely, I was definitely a late developer. I feel like, at my age now, at my very great age, that I'm just growing into myself. I'm a late developer, and yeah, hopefully I'll go on for a couple more years.
Well, okay. I mean, this is interesting. When do you said you're a late developer. When do you think you finally settled as a person, where you're finally like, okay, this is me. I can now just exist in the world as myself. And I'm not pretend, like, like the way I was saying before, like you have to pretend with people, or you have to put out that energy. There's also a point, not for a lot of people, but for some lucky people, where you kind of settle. When did that happen?
I think it was when I did the Hangovers album. That was 1998, and I that released the day after I got married to Mike Holdsworth, my husband, and then I just felt that was just coming into myself then, and it's been a gradual process since then of actually feeling more and more and more at home with myself. When I started painting again, and then doing the solo albums with Third Man. It just growing and growing. And I feel that's what's great, in a way, that, some people, when they reach a certain age, they kind of feel like they stop growing, but I felt like I'm growing all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that's haunted me has been a fear of becoming mediocre as I get older, and not grow, and not exploring, and just, there's a lot of musical artists who I won't name, but who just like, yeah, they've been doing this for decades, and they're just kind of like not settled in a good way, but they're just kind of like churning things out rotely as opposed to like exploring. And that's always been a fear. Like, what if I turn out like that?
Well, you have to keep taking risks, and always keeping your eyes and ears open. I mean, for me, going back to painting was enormously eye-opening, because, I'd been making films and and it becomes problematic. And then I learned, making a big canvas, I could tell stories in a different way. And, perspective didn't have to be perspective. You could put anything anywhere. And in a way, it's the same with music. You can find sounds and then there's like more recently on this tour, I've kind of thought about Laurie Anderson and storytelling quite a lot. And so I've been improvising kind of ideas around storytelling within some songs and, just finding different ways of expressing things it feels like a kind of, a kind of expansion.
Yeah. You know what it is too? I think I think some people like the trappings of the career get in the way of the creative exploration. And there are certain expectations that they feel like they have to meet.
Yeah.
And that destroys the art of it.
Well, the thing is, my career has just always been quite motley, but it's never been, I made lots of music videos for bands, but never in the way that some video makers would want it to be. I'm going to do the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the this and the fucking that, but no, I do 3 for the Libertines, and they're like the first ones and low budget. And then I do low budget ones for lots of rough trade bands. And, so, and I can keep I did one for Warner's, and then they come in and they say, oh, I don't like this shot and I don't like that shot. And I think, actually, I don't really want to make videos for Warner's because they don't like the shots I like. So, being low budget does give you freedom.
Yeah. That's something that I've always, Sarah Silverman, I don't know if you know her, she's a comedian, but something that she had said decades ago that kind of got stuck in my head was like, keep a low overhead. If you have a low overhead, you can say no to things. You can make the stuff you want to make, and you can say no to the stuff you don't want to make.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I never say no to anything, but they might say no to me then when they see what my reaction to it is. I say, I'll give it a crack, and they'll say, well, perhaps not like that.
So I'm still kind of, I'm going back in my head, and I'm imagining you at the dinner table, your dad holding court. And I'm kind of wondering, just like, what was your response? What were you like hanging on your dad's every word during this time? Or were you just like, can I get a word in edgewise? Like, what was going on?
Neither of those, really. I mean, there was a lot of teasing. My dad had this thing called the wag finger. If you spilt anything on the tablecloth, he'd get everyone to do this to you at the table. So there was a lot of kind of teasing and humiliation. So you kind of kept a bit of a low profile, to be honest.
What did he do for a living?
He was in the rag trade. He got a degree in history, and then he worked for John Lewis, a department store. Then he worked in running a factory, making clothes for Mother Care and Marks and Spencer's and that kind of thing. He never kind of earned loads of money. He was a managing director, but of a small firm,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm in my head now too. And I'm just thinking, I'm like, you are at the age where like, okay, you see the Beatles and the change in culture in the late 60s. Then by the time you're in art school and making music, you see the change, like the Thatcherism come in. You saw, for my whole life, I was born in 1979. So like my whole life has been up until lately, and I'm not thrilled with the changes in America, but it was kind of the same. It was samey, 80s, 90s, 2000s into the teens. It was kind of the samey. You saw in the space of like 15 years and 15 formative years for yourself, everything shifted in different ways in the UK.
But in one way, I just rode on it and I didn't realize that the changes were so big. When you discover them, you kind of think they've always been there. I didn't realize, I didn't have that perspective. I mean, I've never been a big history buff. I always thought history was weird. Why would people be so interested in it? I mean, now I'm interested in it, but at the time, I was just kind of moving forward through it. And, you know, the Beatles are here, but I didn't quite realize that they'd only just arrived. Do you know what I mean? You see them on the television, but I didn't realize they hadn't existed before. And I always thought all those pop stars, you know, David Bowie and everything, had kind of landed from Mars, and that they'd always been around, and then I just found them. I didn't quite clock the changes. I wasn't that smart, to be honest, you know.
But you said, I think this is the other thing that's interesting. It was like, you said you were an oddball, but like, did that feeling emerge when you were a kid, or was it only later, again, like you said, in retrospect with cultural changes, that you kind of realized, oh yeah, I didn't like quite fit in there?
No, well, I've always rocked, you know. I think that was because I of my birth and everything, and that insecurity. I noticed Ariappa was rocked too. I don't know where it comes from. I know that they do that in orphanages and stuff. But so that was an odd thing for me. And then when my brother had a girlfriend, you know, and I always dressed a bit differently. I wore weird clothes, Olaf daughter boots and strange. I met a girl who gave me one of these strange Afghan dresses. She was a diplomat's daughter. She gave me this beautiful dress, and I wore with these strange boots. And I just always wore clothes that were a bit different from other people. I didn't like dress like my friends, and I was never kind of watching what they were wearing. I just chose the things I liked. So I suppose I didn't realize I was an oddball. When my brother's girlfriend said, "Oh, I see what Nick means when he says you dress weird," that was kind of a bit of a shock to me. But, you know, like at school, you could go to the second-hand shop and buy the clothes from, and the new coats were like these short kind of streamlined little coats, and I'd go in and buy the really old coat, which was like a great coat with a collar, and it went down to the ground with a belt, you know. So while everyone was wearing these little short things, I was wearing the really old school uniform and stuff. That kind of thing, you know. Different things appealed to me.
Yeah, but like, aside from your brother's girlfriend, no one said anything, no one teased you, you were just allowed to kind of be yourself?
I think so. They just thought I was funny, you know. My dad would tease me. I was funny. You know, I was the cute girl.
Because I do think it's interesting.
I haven't spent enough time in therapy going over this stuff. You know, I expect half the people you talk to have really analysed this stuff. I haven't really. I'm just thinking about it now.
Yeah, because like that protective bubble, I assume, was what allowed you to kind of like become who you were, right? Without that protective bubble, you would have either had to kind of repress that oddness or like sand it off and just like be like other people, because, you know, it all depends on like, can you weather other people's feelings about you, right? If you can, or they don't bother you for some reason at all, like they just let you be, then you get to be yourself.
Yeah. I think that's true. I don't, you know, I don't really like people disliking me. It bothers me a bit, but at the same time, I'd rather be myself than try and fit into what they want me to be. I don't know how to do that because I've never actually done it. I've always been, I say, you know, my parents provided a safe platform from which I could fly, you know.
Do you think it's because like, and I'm only comparing this, like a lot of parents, like not out of any kind of malicious intent, they just want the best for their kids. And so they're like, oh, you got to fit in. Do you think it's in any way related to like, oh, you know, you survived these 3 blood transfusions. Let's just let her be.
I hope so. I think they were just glad I was alive. Yep.
Yeah, because it feels unique.
I mean, I sucked my thumb. My dad used to always come and chase after me to put mustard on my thumb, but it was only ever a joke. He never really did that, you know?
Sure. So like you said, art school was always the thing. Like, at what point do you realize that that's the direction you want in your life?
The first day.
Of art school? But I mean, like, before that, like, where you're like, this is where I want to go. I want to make art. This is what I want to do. Like, that happened earlier in your life?
Yeah, I think I always knew I wanted to do art. Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I really articulated it. I'd need to have some
hypnotherapy?
I'd need to go back in hypnosis or something. I don't know. I mean, I remember when I was, before I went to school, my brother, who was 2 years older, came home from school, reception, and he'd got this piece of paper and it had two circles, brown paper and another brown paper, and it had two ears and a tail. It was the back of a cat. And I remember thinking, wow, I want to do that. You know, from the time I was 3 or 4, it was something that made my heart beat. And it was just a bloody bits of brown circles, you know?
Yeah.
And we didn't really do that at home. With my kids, when I had kids, I just ran an art school the whole time. We made films, we did plays, we just did that because I liked that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that in my childhood, particularly, you know. I just remember my brother coming home from school and just thinking that was the best thing. And I couldn't wait to go to school so I could do something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't think I could do it at home.
Yeah. Was there anything you said? I really like the way you phrased that. Like, it made my heart beat. As not exactly your phrasing, but like, was there anything else that made you feel like that? Or was it like, once you like realized this, you're like, oh, okay, so this is it for me?
Yeah, I think so somehow. I mean, I never quite articulated it in that way, but I was always happy in the art room, you know. I was happy. I think I'm going to have to go in a minute because it's going to be my sound check. So if you want to pick this up another time, I'm happy to do that. But I've got to go and get ready for my sound check.
Okay. Gina, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.